Welcome back to the session. So today in this session we are going to look at the sum and the every methods. And to start learning about the sum method, let's look back at the includes method that we studied earlier. So let's log this to the console here moments dot includes, and here I am giving the minus 130, and let's also log our moments array so we can see it. So here we see that the value of minus 140 that we are testing here. So minus 130 that we are testing here. And so here we see that in this array, this we have here the true. So the test if an array includes a certain value. Now, however, we can only really test for equality. So basically includes here returns true. If any value in the array is exactly equal to minus 130. And so again, this is essentially testing for equality. But what if we wanted to test for a condition instead? And so that's where this some method comes into play. So let's say that we would like to know if there has been any deposits on this account or not. So in other words, we want to know if there is any positive movements in this array or not. So any number above 0. So how could we do that? Now we can say that movements dot sum. So sum method, and now we can specify our condition here as always. So the same callback function which has to return either true or false. And so deposit is a movement greater than 0. So let's call this here const any deposits and log to the console.log. And so here we get that it is true. See this? And now we have, of course, more than one deposits here. So, but let's say we wanted to test if there is any deposit above 5,000. So here we see that we can check if there is something above this value and then it is false. Or we can check if this is something above 1500 and now it's true because there is one movement here. And in this condition, you see that these two methods here are kind of similar. The difference is that here it checks only for equality. So equality, but here we can specify a condition now. And so here this one, we could rewrite it like this. So let's log it to the console. So movements dot sum and minus, that is movements arrow function, movement is strictly equal minus 130. So this would be exactly the same, and that's why we get true on this one. Now for equality, that doesn't make sense. So we could then simply use the includes method, but for the case, we need a condition like this one or really this one. Then the sum method is perfect for that. And probably if I would have named this method and I'm calling it dot any, but of course that is not the real name, but that's really what it does. And if there is any value for which this condition is true, then the sum method will return true. Now right, and let's actually use this sum method to implement our missing functionality, which is to request a loan to the bank. So we will do that right here between the transfer button and the close button. And the sum method will become helpful for this loan feature. Because our bank has a rule which says that it only grants a loan if there at least one deposit with at least 10% of the requested loan amount. So that is complicated, but we will implement this here in a second. So button loan dot add event listener, click, and this is now always the same as you can see. So starting by preventing the default action, prevent default. So this is always be the first thing, and then let's have a look at the user interface. So now it is hidden, and you see that here we only have this one field, and this field is called the input loan amount. So input loan amount, that's the element with this long class name. So let's copy that one. And now let's start by actually getting that amount. Const amount equal number, and we need to convert this input dot value, loan amount dot value. And now we need to create our condition. So first of all, that amount should be greater than 0. And now let's take a look here at our flowchart. So this is what I was saying earlier. The loan is only granted if there is any deposit. So that's greater or equal 10% of the requested amount of the loan. So we see that we need now our second condition, which translates that. And so whenever we see or hear the word any, we can already know that it's probably a good use case for the sum method. So let me show that to you. So as always, we get the movements from the current account object.movements. And now on there, we call the sum method. So we already know by now how this callback function feature here works. So we get the current movement in the current iteration. And now here the condition is that movement needs to be greater or equal than 10% of the amount. So that's the amount divided by 10. Now, or we could also do 0.1 times. So that's exactly the same thing. So here 0.1 stands for 10%, and let's keep it like this. So give it a save. Now let's take a look. If at least one of the elements in the movements array has this condition, so it's true. So basically it's greater than 10% of the requested amount, then all of this here will become true. And so sum method is perfect to be used in this condition like this. So when we need to test for something, so in this case this is true, and I closed our flowchart again. And in this case this is true, then add a positive movement to the current data and update the UI. So that's here, add the movement here. So current account dot movements dot push, and then of course the amount that was requested, and then update the UI. And for that, we already created our nice function which gives all of the functionalities in one. So update UI, and we simply pass the current account into it. And that's it. Finally, let's go then clear the input fields so that value equals empty value. Empty value. And we did that here and also here. Now let's give a save and then reload. Let's see login details. And you see that these deposits, and the largest deposit is 3,000, and so the loan that I can request can be maximum 30,000. So further, because 3,000 here is the 10% of that, so let me try something bigger. So something really 50,000 or 5 lakhs. So now nothing happened, and again in this real world we would then probably get some error message somewhere here at the top or so, but in this case we are not gonna doing that. So let's just try for 5,000 now. And so now indeed it appeared here in our movements. And also you see our balance was updated, and also here our total income. And now let's request 50,000. And so with this, you can now actually cheat. You can always create a little bit of a larger number. So now I can even request 500,000, and so that's cheating our algorithm, which is a way too simple, but of course this is just for testing purposes. And so that is how the sum method works. I hope that this makes sense. And so let's now actually go back here and talk the close cousin of the sum method, which is the every method. So let's write here some and every. So again, the every method is pretty similar to the sum method. But you guess that the difference between them is that every only returns true if all the elements in the array satisfy the condition that we pass in. So in other words, if every element passes the test in our callback function, only then the every method returns true. And that's why the method is called every in the first place. So let's test it out here now. So let's log this to the console moments.every and then with the same condition. Now let's check if all of our movements here are deposits, and now they are not. That's why we get false. However, we do have one account which only have positive movements. So let me show that to you. That's account 4, and account 4 all the movements are positive. So let's check it now here. So account 4 and then the same condition, and here every is not a function. Error, and that's of course because we are still missing the moments array, and now here we see that it is true. So this proves that the every returns true if all the elements in the array satisfy this condition, because in this moments array all of the values are in fact above 0. So that's how the every method works, and I think it's quite straightforward, isn't it? And now to finish, there is no new more cool thing that I want to show you. So up until this point, we have always returned the callback function directly as an argument into our array methods. So however, we could also write this function separately and then pass the function as a callback. So let's say separate callback. So we could do this. Let's call deposit to this function. And so this function here is exactly the same as this ones. But as I said, there is no reason for them to being directly written here. In all these array methods, we could simply write them like this, and then all we could do is to call moments.sum, for example, and then deposits or deposit. And now we could reuse the same function for all kinds of different methods that require callbacks with a true or false condition, so that it would be every or filter as well. And so here the result of these three operations, and here we get the expected results, and all by reusing the same function. Then if we wanted to change the function, all we would have to do is to change it here in one place, and then all the results would become different according to that. So in practice, that's something that we do sometimes, because this is of course better for the try principle. So don't repeat yourself, that's always important, and it is important here as well. So this is all about the session. See you in the next one. Thank you.